Welcome to day one of the Stitch Along, and today we're going to look at how to transfer the pattern that hopefully you printed off onto your fabric so you're ready to sew tomorrow. So as mentioned, you'll need to print off the pattern. Now in most cases, if you print it off just as is, it'll be the correct size, but you might want to just look in your printer settings. Quite often you get a setting where you can customize the size and allow you to customize it to 100%. And that just means you've printed it off at exactly the same size as it's meant to be. So once that's printed off, you'll also need your hoop and your fabric. So if you unscrew the hoop, so loosen it at the top and unscrew your hoop so it's in two pieces, then place your fabric on top of the smaller internal hoop. Okay, like that. Pop the larger part of the hoop over the top and press down. Okay, and then hold the hoop and screw the fabric hoop tight. Once you've done that, just pull the fabric so it's nice and taut. Now you're going to be sewing, when you sew, you'll sew on this side, but when you actually transfer the diagram, you're going to be transferring it on the inside of the hoop. So what you're going to need, you're either going to need some form of light box, it could be an iPad or something similar with a white screen, or if you haven't got anything like that, you could actually take your pattern and tape it to a south-facing window and use that as the light box. Now I'm using a light box here. So what you're going to need to do is pop your design, or the pattern rather, onto the light box. As I mentioned, if you haven't got one of these or an iPad or something similar, if you pop some tape on the pattern and literally tape it to the window, and then you can hold your hoop against the window and you can just draw it on vertically rather than horizontally. So make sure that the fabric is face down, so you've got the smaller inner part of the hoop facing upwards. So ultimately the fabric is actually physically touching the paper, and make sure you've got your design roughly in the center. Again, if you don't want things to move, what you can do, you can tape the paper onto the light box. You can also, if you've got double tape, you can double tape the fabric to the pattern as well, so your hoop doesn't move around. Now to transfer the design, you can do it in pencil. So if you're a beginner and you don't want to be splashing out on fancy pens, pencil is fine, particularly for this pattern, because it's not a very delicate pattern. Sometimes if you've got a very delicate pattern and you use a pencil and you're just using maybe one strand of thread, you can sometimes still see the pencil marks when you're finished. But in most cases, something like this, it's quite a chunky pattern. If you were to do it in pencil, the stitches are fat enough and thick enough to actually cover them up. But if you were thinking of taking it a little bit further, something like a heat erasable pen works really, really well. I like using the Pilot friction ones. You can get them in a variety of colours, and again, they're about £4, €4 roughly for a pen. And basically all you do is you'll use this to transfer the design, and when you're finished, you can use, I normally use a hairdryer just on it for a few seconds to heat it up, or you can use an iron again to heat it up, and the pen will disappear. So all you're going to do now is press down on your hoop, and you're just going to trace the design. I tend to trace in short little pockets like that, rather than one long. There we go. You don't need to worry about these parts here where you've got straight lines. You don't need to use rulers. You're just using a rough guide. It's just a rough guide for where your stitches are going to go. Again, if you're using the heat erasable pen, they're going to be removed at the end anyway, so you're not going to see them. So you'll just continue this until you've got the entire design sketched out. Okay, now once you've done that, what you need to do is make sure your fabric is turned back over the correct way. So take your fabric back out of the hoop, so unscrew, take the hoop off, and this time you're going to place the fabric in your hoop with your design up. Okay, so place it on the smaller hoop with the design up. Make sure your design is central, if so. Now, it doesn't matter if it's not central. For example, you can do it slightly off center and stitch this part, and then at a later date unscrew, move it across. So you can move your hoop around the design. So for example, if you've got a large design and a small hoop, you just move the hoop around to the part that you're actually completing at that particular time. And also, if you have got a larger embroidery that's going to take a bit of time, it's actually worth taking the fabric out of the hoop overnight, so in between sections. Otherwise, sometimes you can get a bit of a dirt mark that goes around the edges of your hoop. But no matter how many times you wash your fingers, you do leave marks around it. So sometimes it's actually better to remove the fabric at the end of each day and then put it in fresh every time you start stitching. Okay, so you've got your fabric over your inner hoop, design side up, and now you're just going to press down the outer hoop, and you're going to do exactly what we did before. Push the hoop, this bit of the hoop together, so you're closing it as far as possible, and tighten the hoop up. Okay, and when you've got it as tight as possible, you're also going to want to pull on the fabric and just make sure the fabric is nice and tight all the way around. Okay, so you've got no sagging. You might need to do this every so often again while you're sewing as well, but it should be like a drum there. Okay, so now you've got your design on there. Hopefully you've got your thread to go, and tomorrow we're going to start off with 2 stitches. We're going to stitch the side parts there.